today. So we're going to spend the next hour or so discussing the practical tips and resources to understand the sector's shifting tech landscape. What we're going to focus on are key insights from the 2023 Digital Skills Report from CanadaHelps and Charity Growth Academy, what you can do in your organization to become more digitally enabled, and how Charity Growth Academy can help you get there. And as Kiara mentioned, we will finish up with enough time for a Q&A. So just to start, a bit about the Digital Skills Report, which some of you may be familiar with. So we first conducted the digital skills research in 2021 because there really wasn't any comprehensive Canadian data on digital skills in the charitable sector. Certainly lots that we knew anecdotally, but in terms of putting it together in one place, this was a need that we saw. And so the results from that survey at the time helped inform the work that we did in launching Charity Growth Academy, first as a pilot supported by MasterCard ChangeWorks, and then in 2023 as a self-serve platform. The first report served as a baseline, and now 2 years later, we've updated those results. And we're hoping that this data will support both charities and funders in determining the best areas of investment going forward. And we'll hope it'll help charities understand the urgency of this issue and encourage the sector to leverage the many resources that exist, like Charity Growth Academy. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Anya, and she's going to go through the results of the report.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, as Liz mentioned, I'm going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes or so going through some key insights that the report revealed. As I go through each slide, we're going to be focusing on a different insight, and interested to know whether or not that trend that I'm going to be speaking about reflects your reality in your organization, or whether you're experiencing something different. So, feel free in the chat to the organizers and the panelists to let us know whether any of these insights in particular make you feel like, oh my gosh, yes, I finally feel seen, that is us, or haven't really experienced that, and in fact have a question about that. So as we mentioned, we're going to leave lots of time for questions at the end, but do feel free to pop the questions or thoughts or responses into the chat as we go. Sometimes I know myself, a bit of a goldfish memory over here. If I don't write it down right away, it escapes out of my brain. So let's dig into the first slide. So one of the overall things that we looked at was this change between 2021 and 2023, and if we saw any measurable changes. What we saw is that charities in 2023 are experiencing a real growing sense of urgency around digital enablement. They do tend to agree across different organization sizes that digital tools will make their mission delivery easier. They're more sure about that than those who were surveyed in 2021, that not adopting digital will in fact diminish their capacity. It would have been interesting to have seen if there had been a market change between before pandemic and after pandemic. I'm sure for many of you, the pandemic was kind of a line in the sand that indicated, oh, you know what, we really do need to think about being able to work from anywhere, being able to facilitate collaboration online, being able to offer some of our programming through digital means, right? So I would say that if we had conducted this research in 2019 and then 2021 and 2023, we would have seen an even bigger difference. So I'm interested to know whether people feel like the pandemic was a bit of a Kickstarter for your organization's sense of urgency or priority around digital. So not only are they feeling that pressure to improve digital, there's also an awareness that there's still a skills gap. So there's in 2023, we saw even more of an awareness that the need to improve digital skills was clear. Kind of in some ways, this maybe suggests that, in 2021, folks started experimenting more with technology, and then in 2023, we're like, oh, that experimentation has revealed, in fact, what we don't know and what we do need in order to be able to leverage these two tools really well. So, while we see that confidence may have improved in 2021, we're definitely still seeing a sense of, we're not entirely prepared to leverage the possibility of digital, and we have some work to do. So yeah, interested to know whether that resonates with you or not. So let us know in the chat. Let's pop over onto the next slide. So one thing that we saw quite plainly was that technology adoption isn't really that strategic. So folks are, agreeing or somewhat agreeing that that their team members are encouraged to propose new ideas. So like, what if we tried this, or what if we tried that? And those, those thoughts and that kind of possibility thinking is encouraged, which is great. However, only 4 in 10 are agreeing that there is a clear understanding of how to leverage digital. So, it's encouraging to see that charities are being invited to think innovatively about how work gets done. But when that appetite or imagination isn't met with a strategic approach to building skills and knowledge of how those digital tools could help implement those innovations and ideas, that freedom, that's part of the culture can feel kind of hollow, right? So in addition, some of these responses really suggested that there are other elements of culture that perhaps need to be further explored, so that we can understand why these organizations aren't necessarily moving from ideas to implementation when it comes to digital enablement. And this is very true, right? This happens across a lot of organizations. Is we read about interesting approaches to how we can use technology, and then when it comes to the but how do we do it, right? That's the piece that's missing, and not just like how do we do it from do we have the skills and the technology subscribed to, but how do we make the time to be able to implement these things and learn new things, and be trained and adopt new technologies, right? So that how piece is missing from a lot of strategic direction. So that's a really key thing to address. Let's pop over to our next slide. So what we're seeing amongst small charities is that they're still kind of missing from some core cloud tools. So this is just a snapshot of 4 really important sort of difference-making technologies, cloud-based technologies that charities could be using. So collaboration and project management tools, data visualization tools, integration as a service strategies. So those are simply tools that help move data from one cloud tool to another automatically, and then a CRM or a DMS, so basically a database type of software. And so we can see, out of just these exemplary 4 tools that our small charities really haven't adopted these technologies in any big way. So. This is coming also from the fact that only 56% of the smallest charities agree or somewhat agree that they understand the fundamentals. So this gap in knowledge is really holding those smaller charities back, in spite of the fact that these tools, they don't require coding knowledge. They don't require massive outputs of cash to subscribe to, like I typically, in working with my clients, and some of them are very small, suggest that between $7,500 and $10,000 budgeted annually for subscription costs can get you some really slick and complete technology stack. So one of the things to note in the sense that they're missing from these technologies is what they could learn about what's possible with cloud technologies that could help perhaps drive investment and adoption. Let's move on to our next insight. So, I think we can all acknowledge that leaders play a big part in driving digital transformation. But I think, our survey results are showing that that staff are suggesting that there's perhaps not always a clear vision of how digital could help the organization achieve even more mission-related results. So that's a real priority. You know, we can see a lot of charities ranked that as their first or second priority that they feel that leaders need to focus on. And then another key priority that charities are suggesting that they want leaders to focus on is, you know, understanding what digital transformation is, what it can do, what are the implications of it, and of course how to take it on. So on the whole, you know, we had a lot of respondents agree that leadership has the skills to steward the organization through transformation, but then a lot of organizations are disagreeing that there's an understanding of how to leverage digital. So there's kind of a little bit of a aha or a moment, right? If folks are saying, oh yeah, leadership has skills to work us through this or to support us through this, but yet there's no strategic, there's a strategic gap or a skills gap, you know, kind of makes you think, well, how can both things be true, right? One of our findings is also that, you know, we had a lot of respondents who were in fact themselves leaders, and so sometimes we tend to rate ourselves as having everything that we need in order to take digital transformation forward, but in fact we kind of trip on the truth when it's like, well, do you have a strategic plan that includes technology? And if the answer is no, then in fact, perhaps that confidence is a little bit inflated. Okay, let's move over onto the next slide. So for sure, you know, funding is one of the big barriers that organizations suggest that is holding them back. So yeah, it's becoming clear that charities are not being resourced to support this digital transformation work. 27% of respondents say that funders would prefer that they use their funding in other ways. So this is obviously very consistent with all trends that we see in the sector around funding being typically earmarked for program-related costs and technology seen somehow as administrative or capacity costs. But in fact, we know in 2024, this is just not the case, right? Technology, both subscription costs and the time it takes to manage it well, are a fundamental part of program delivery. There's very few aspects of a nonprofit program delivery or operations that couldn't be improved by the use of technology. And when I say the use of, I don't just mean that you're configuring the tool, I mean that you're also engaged in really good technology stewardship practices, so documenting your processes, regularly reviewing them, investing in some improvements in those processes on an annual basis, you know, investing in staff to develop new skills, taking the time to learn and adopt new tools. So all of that becomes part of technology governance. And it's not just an administrative cost, it's not overhead, it's key to program delivery. So, so some conversations have to be had there. The skills piece too is also a major barrier. As Kiara noted at the top of this webinar, there are so many great places to go for skill-specific training for charities and technology. So, and we've also at CanadaHelps with, as part of the Charity Growth Academy, we've amassed a database of about 300 plus resources, including TechSoup's resources, where charities can access free, sometimes a lot of them free training courses, materials, programs that can help boost those skills. So it's really not anymore a case of like, well, I don't know where to go to learn. It's more how are we making learning and skills development a priority within our organizations? And of course, this comes back to leadership and making technology enablement, including skills development, a strategic part of our organization's goals. Let's pop into the next slide. So some of what we're seeing from the results is a little bit of a misunderstanding or a lack of awareness about the benefits and possibilities of digital technologies. And we see that in the sense that about 27% of small charities rank improving their website and social media presence as the most important advantage of using digital technologies. But in fact, when we look at how larger, perhaps more sophisticated organizations are responding to that question, you know, they're looking at you know, impact and the delivery of mission-related benefits through technology. So I think sometimes organizations who are a little less sophisticated or far along on their technology journey automatically, in a knee-jerk way, think, oh, technology, website, social media, right? But your website and social media are simply kind of like the front door to your organization. What the massive benefit of digital technologies is how, when people walk through that front door, so when they land on your website or when they click on, you know, an ad or a post on social media, that you're able to then take their information. So whether they're donors or program participants or potential volunteers or just asking you for information about your organization, so they're able to enter that information through your website through some kind of form, some kind of way that's easy and seamless, and that information, once it's provided to your charity, is able to find its way to the right person who can answer that question or who can handle that information, and in a way that's not just to like an inbox that somebody's occasionally checking in on, but rather that's perhaps going into a database, and the right person is perhaps being assigned a task to respond, or if they're making a donation, they're automatically receiving their tax receipt, or they're signing up for the program, they're able to pay online and receive their confirmation email you know, quickly and efficiently. So that's not really about a website. That's more about what happens as a person lands on your website and provides you with their information. So so the gulf between sort of this priority around, oh, social media and website, and, you know, larger charities knowing that leveraging digital will help them deliver their mission more efficiently, kind of speaks to a little bit of a difference between how smaller and larger organizations understand digital transformation. So, you know, this is a telling quote here that we see from one of our respondents. You know, in applying for funding, a challenge has been the lack of knowledge of our true needs of digital tools, right? This is a little bit of a case of not knowing what we don't know. So if organizations have the opportunity to apply for funding and they're smaller, they'll often sort of say, oh, you know, we need a new website. And I see this often with my clients. And it's not that they need a new website, it's that they need better information management systems, and some cloud technologies to help them facilitate that management of information. So I thought that's pretty telling. Okay, let's pop over into our next slide. Yeah, okay. So what I mentioned before, technology governance. So technology governance is really just the processes and decisions that define how technology is used in an organization, right? So, you know, are we documenting how we do our work? Do we have a catalog of our tools and how we use them? Are we regularly reviewing our flow of data and information to sort of say, you know, can we improve this? You know, are we regularly looking at our technologies and noting if we have redundancies, like we're paying for 2 tools and they actually do the same kind of thing? You know, are we sort of doing that regular maintenance around our whole technology? And not having that kind of governance strategy can really lead to poor sustainability. And by sustainability around technology, what I mean is, you know, poor sustainability is we implemented a new CRM, but nobody's using it, right? That is a technology build that wasn't governed, and so it wasn't sustained. And it started to feel like a little bit of a waste of money, right? And time. So small charities who are really lacking in that capacity or awareness about how to maintain technologies, and by the way, large charities also have some room to improve in this area as well. You know, they can often feel like digital projects are a waste of time. So without the ability to maintain them, those implementation projects they can grow kind of stale and ineffective. They don't stand the test of turnover, right? Like maybe there was like one person who was really psyched about that tech and like really championed it and got everybody to use it really well, and then they moved on, and once they were gone, like forget it, like it just wasn't maintained. That's a typical sort of scenario where that technology is poorly sustained. So all of this could indicate why between 18 and 30% of organizations under $1 million disagreed or were unsure that investing in digital was a good use of funds, right? So if you're not really seeing the benefits of it, and it feels like we did all this work for something that nobody's using, then it doesn't really feel like a good use of funds or of time. So technology governance is really make or break once you've gone down that pathway of committing to subscribing and implementing to new technologies or processes. Let's pop into the next slide. So integrations and automations are really kind of like the information highways that exist up in the cloud that move data from one cloud tool into another. Okay, and this is what allows us to not have to be doing a lot of manual data entry. And it's never been easier to build integrations between technologies. There are services like Zapier, Tray, Microsoft Flow. These technologies don't require any coding. They're relatively affordable. We're talking like $20 a month. And an organization that uses them well can reduce their manual data handling by 50 or 60%. And it's unbelievable the benefits that you can get from using integrations or from automating certain processes. So there's a lot of a lack of awareness, especially around small charities, about the potential of integrations and automations. I guarantee that most small charities have access to some type of an integration through some of their technologies and are not even aware of it, nevertheless, like and don't in fact know how to turn it on or how to implement it or what the benefits are. So our larger charities are definitely using and leveraging those automations. So there's still room to go. The larger organizations were twice as likely as all charities combined to rank increasing the use of automation as a top priority for where they'd like to grow. But they are sometimes consistent with never having used some of these integration as a service platforms that I just mentioned, the ones that are inexpensive and don't require coding. They were kind of like never really heard of them. So this could be as a result of some of the times that some of the respondents, so about 50% of the survey respondents were either executives, so a board member, an ED, or a CEO. So I mean, while we can't kind of come to a definite conclusion about that ranking of integration as a survey tools is quite low, it may be that executives are kind of a step removed from operations and may not really be aware of how useful and important these kinds of technologies can be for data accuracy, efficiency, collaboration, and great donor and staff satisfaction. Okay. Before we move into the next section, where we can talk about how you can, as an organization, improve and hopefully, sort of see yourself as a little bit beyond the benchmark that we've shown you in these graphs. Just interested to know if there's anything that's come up in the chat, Kiara or Liz, that could be addressed now before we moved on. Any questions about those charts or resounding comments?
No questions or comments at the moment, although slowly we're starting to get broader questions that we can address later. But I encourage everyone, if you have any reflections or if you're noticing any perhaps gaps in your own experience or something really resonates and you want to dive deep with our experts, send us a question and we'll compile them for the Q&A. Thanks, Anya, for checking.
Yeah, no, perfect. That sounds great. Okay, so let's pop into our next section. So, you know, given that this is the state of the charitable sector, which is, you know, struggling in some ways, but, you know, also in other ways making progress. And by the way, this struggle to digitally transform, this is not just evident in the charitable sector. We do see this struggle around digital transformation across all sectors. So I kind of hate, you know, this idea that, oh, it's charities and they're just not keeping up. You know, it's incredibly difficult for all sectors to keep up with new emerging technologies and to constantly adapt and improve processes, roll those new processes out, train people, document them. Like it is not easy. So, you know, the charitable sector is not alone in this. So I want to make that clear. But so how can you begin to improve as an organization so that you can become more digitally enabled? First things first, whenever I'm working with clients who are interested in this journey, we benchmark. We look at the current tools that are being used and the current skill level. So what are you using? Like simply making a list of what you're using and how are you using them? You know, what do you use this form tool? What do you use for? What do you use this email marketing tool for besides the obvious? How are you using your donor management system? If you are you know, being donated Google Workspace or Microsoft 365 through TechSoup's referral programs, like how are you using, which of those tools that are part of those suites are you using and how are you using them? I just had a conversation with a client yesterday who was using Google Forms and was downloading all the responses into an Excel sheet and then uploading that Excel sheet into Drive. And in our call, I was like, oh, hey, did you know that with one click, you can create a Google Sheet that will automatically capture all of the responses from that form, and it's already in Drive. So we've just saved you, you know, 4 or 5 steps. And she was just like, oh my gosh, that's awesome, right? So, but without sort of doing that benchmarking exercise, it's hard to then see how you can improve on how you're using them or what skills you might need to consider adding into the mix, right? So benchmarking, first important step to do. Second really important step to do is document your current processes, right? Again, on a call with a client yesterday, 2 staff members who work together on a program, on the same program, I was asking them, you know, okay, well, walk me through all of the steps of program registration and program management. And just in speaking their steps out to each other out loud, they realized that each one of them was doing things slightly differently or was putting information in different places or had a different approach. And you know, this was leading to some fragmentation of data. So someone had a sheet over here, someone had a sheet over there, was leading to duplication of effort, right? They were kind of stepping on each other's toes without even really realizing. And so that's a really helpful thing to do, is to sit around the table and go program by program, you know, business process by business process. So whether that's donations or financial management, et cetera, and map it all out. Take a big piece of paper, take a whiteboard, use a tool like Lucidchart or Miro if you want to use you know, a cloud collaborative tool for it. But yeah, paper and pen is great too. And don't skip any step, right? I used to teach process mapping to students at Humber, and one of the exercises that we would do is I would say to them, walk me through how to make a cup of tea. And they would do so, and then I would pretend like I'm an alien from Mars, and I would show them all of the actual steps that they had left out, right? We often get into like these habits of working, and we don't, in fact, appreciate all of the different pieces that go into accomplishing a task. But mapping each of those steps out helps us understand where there are efficiencies, inefficiencies, where there's duplication of effort, right? So that's a key exercise that you could start on today. And then, you know, once you've done that benchmarking of tools and skills and documentation, now you can start to make a plan for what you're going to improve and make sure that this plan becomes part of your strategic priorities, right? So if it turns out that, oh, in fact, we're only using like 3 of the 12 tools that are available to us through Microsoft 365, and folks are a little fuzzy on how to use the rest of them, okay, that's going to be part of our strategic priority, is evaluating those other tools to see how they could be of use, and investing 2 hours a week for staff to learn about how those tools work. And so when it comes to those possibility thinking, those like, wouldn't it be great if we could? Now there'll be a sense, oh yeah, it would be great if we could. And I just learned about Microsoft Flow, and I think we could easily connect that form to that spreadsheet. Okay, and so then now we can start to see some progress happening, and for it to be connected to a strategic priority. And let's move on to the next slide as I take a sip of water. Okay. So I haven't really talked about the actual technologies as much. You might notice, like I'm kind of focusing on the things that we do around technologies. And that's because the configuration of the tool is kind of the last thing that we need to worry about. Everything else around how we use and manage and strategically plan around technologies is the more complicated and complex thing to work through. You can always find a third-party implementation partner who can help you, configure that tool. You can always read documentation and figure out how that email automation works. But what needs to happen kind of before you get into, roll your sleeves up and get under the hood of your technologies are some of the other kind of softer skills and habits around technology. So the first thing is your mindset. So what kind of mindsets have you or your organization developed around technology? Do you sort of think, oh, it's not useful to us, or we're not an organization that uses tech, or we don't have IT professionals? Is any of that true and perhaps holding you back? Transforming the workaround processes that have calcified into organizational habits and cultures. So, the example of that organization that implemented a CRM, but then still somehow finds themselves doing manually compiling, program or donor reports for the board on a monthly basis. They've created this whole workaround. And now everybody just is like, oh, well, that's how we do it, right? Instead of saying, but do we have to do it that way? Are there different ways we could be doing it, right? So habits can be really helpful and they save us time, but habits can also be insidious because they deepen into this groove that it feels like we can't get out of without a little bit of intentionality. You have to transform some of the skills that you cultivate and search out, right? So maybe instead of another gift administrator who's going to manually enter, donor data into your CRM, maybe you want to look for somebody who knows how to, use one of these no-code integration tools and figure out a way that donation data can flow right into your CRM, right? So maybe that's a different skill that you want to think about bringing in. And then last thing is the tools and technologies that you use. That's the very end. Okay, Liz, yeah, let's go. Okay, so the people piece. So just additional to that mindset piece, just be aware of the story that you tell yourself about technology within your organization, and perhaps question it. On the people transformation, again, we want to create space and time for people to learn these new concepts. And creating space and time for that learning sometimes means taking other things off the table. So what are we willing to not do this month, for example, if we're going to commit to giving people time and space to learn? We can engage in some new habit formation, right? So I have a client who started regularly scheduling some Friday afternoon file and folder shared file and folder, renaming and restoring. So they spend an hour on Friday going, okay, what documents were created this week? Are they named according to our naming convention? And are they stored in the right folder? And guess what? They only had to do that for about 3 weeks, because after 3 weeks, people just were naming them and storing them correctly in the first place. So they were like, okay, well, we don't need to do this anymore. We have this new habit. Let's pop on to the next slide there, Liz. So the processes, as I mentioned, we document our processes and then we regularly review them. So twice a year, okay, at the end of a donation campaign, for example, let's look not just at was it successful, but let's look at the process that information moved through over the course of this campaign. Who is contributing to those process reviews, and then figure out where you park ideas that come up for process improvements in between those review exercises. It's really disruptive to be constantly changing processes, but if you know that you're like, okay, every 2 years we're going to have this time to review our our program registration process, in the times between that, yeah, you can just kind of park those ideas and know that they're not going to be forgotten, but that they will be incorporated in the next process review. And then the next slide, we're then finally looking at the technology and the thinking around technology. So, when you know what you want to improve, then you can start to configure the tech, right? So again, the people and the learning, the processes and the documentation, and then the technology configuration. Always when you're adopting new technology, first look at what you already have. You might not even need a new tool. You might just be able to use something that you're already using even better. And if it does turn out that you do need a new tool, well, then conduct a needs assessment, right? Go around and talk to the people who are going to be using it and understand what it is that tool needs to do, and then do kind of a little bit of a systematic comparison between tools and technologies. Word of mouth is not a great way to make a decision about technology, or taking the advice of your cousin's husband who worked at a startup and is like, I've got this thing, right? These are not great ways to make decisions around which technologies to adopt. Next slide. So I know that this sounds like a lot, but the really good news is that Canada Helps has developed this tool and platform called the Charity Growth Academy. Liz and I have been working on this for a couple of years now, and it's really designed to kickstart your digital enablement and transformation journey, because in that platform, you can do that benchmarking, so you can see where you are today. It will help you have actionable steps that you can take around your specific organization's technologies and how you use them. You have access to really easy to digest training, some of it designed and created by yours truly, other provided by third parties. And it is also a platform where your whole team can work together. So you can invite different levels of users from your team to come into the platform and really mark stuff off on your action plan, so that you can make incremental and consistent progress. Let's move on to the next slide there, Liz. So this is just a couple of screenshots from the Charity Growth Academy, which, by the way, is free and is ready for you right now to go and sign up for and start your assessment. So the first step is a series of questions, an assessment about your organization. We ask you what tools you're using and how you're using them. Shouldn't take more than 10-15 minutes. You can save your progress and you can come back if need be. So that's the first step, and that assessment helps us customize an action plan for you. So you can pop over the next slide there, Liz. And that customized action plan is based on how you're assessed, right? How your organization works and where you are in your digital journey. So each recommendation will have some accompanying action steps that you can check off. So you can mark them as done. You can pin them to the top of your screen so that your team knows which ones are the priorities. You can hide some of them if you feel like, this one's not really relevant or not for my team right now. So really nice ways that you can customize the interface so that your team knows exactly what they can be working on at any given moment. Next slide there, Liz. And then each recommendation includes some specific resources, so you can go deeper on your learning. So some of the resources, obviously, as I mentioned, we've created custom resources within the platform, but there's also resources to external third-party sites. So whether that's a YouTube video or a white paper or just a helpful article. So there's just no end of specific actionable learnings that you can rely on to help you cross things off of your list. As I mentioned, we've got some courses, but we also have some really great white papers and one-pagers, things that we call the art of the possible. So these are just like one-page, two-page briefs, quick studies of ways in which your organization could use technology in order to more efficiently handle information and move it around your organization effectively. Next slide. So this is a really helpful tool for leaders. As we mentioned, staff are looking for leaders to have that strategic vision for how the organization will use technology, and the Charity Growth Academy platform can help you create these goals. At a glance, you'll be able to benchmark where your organization is and what progress they've made against their recommendations. So you'll be able to understand at a high level, what needs to be done and what are the resources that need to be put into place in order to make those things happen. Charity staff, this is also for you. I myself was an accidental techie at an organization. I'm sure there's many accidental techies on the call. So folks who were maybe given a Twitter password at one point and then all of a sudden found themselves doing a database implementation, right? This is somebody who's perhaps a little bit curious about technology, and maybe you find yourself kind of feeling like a one-person show without support to show your colleagues how they can develop new skills, encourage people to get the most out of your technologies, and really make the case to leaders about where investments will improve operational results. So CGA can really help you be kind of your IT savvy colleague. And then lastly, board members. Board members can absolutely be invited into the CGA. Well, you can fill out an assessment on behalf of your organization, but if you are a charity staff or leader who's created an assessment and action plan, you can invite your board members as view-only users, and they can access the training themselves. They can also see that snapshot as to where effort is needed and investment is needed. Sometimes board members with the best intentions want us to be better at technology, but they themselves don't know, how to get us there. So this can help support them as well. So we have just a few minutes left. We've got 13 minutes precisely for some questions. So delighted to take them now.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Anya, and thank you, Liz. We have so many takeaways and just valuable prompts and questions for us to start thinking about. And yeah, we did receive quite a few questions. So again, if you haven't had a chance to type in yours yet and would like to, feel free to do that using the question box. And if not, we'll just get started right away. You opened by telling us about an existing and persisting skills gap in the sector. And I would be curious to hear more about some of the biggest specific skills that perhaps your report found lacking, or you have a sense through the work that you've been doing. For example, you mentioned that nonprofits are missing from the cloud, and we have a sense of what some of the tools related to the cloud are, but we may be a little bit vague on exactly what kind of skills or even professional figures we should be investing in. So do you have a sense from your report of if someone were to start now and in an ideal scenario, they had money to invest in, would they be hiring a specific person, or would they be investing in professional development around specific skills? Like, what would you suggest as a important starting point?
Great question. So I'll give you one practical thing. There's about 10 spreadsheet functions and formulas that every organization should have somebody who knows off the top of their head. So VLOOKUPs, some array formulas, some SUMIFs, some COUNTIFs, some conditional formatting, some data validation. So, as much as we talk about cloud computing and cloud skills, like that's a really just core fundamental skill. Somebody needs to be good at spreadsheets. At the end of the day, a lot of technology comes down to spreadsheets. Number 2, go deep on Google Workspace or Microsoft 365. So whichever one of those platforms you subscribe to, commit to one of them, stop living life in hybrid between both of them, which happens a lot of times, and assign somebody to become the administrator of those platforms. Invest in them becoming a certified administrator of those platforms. As far as the skills development, I think that will pay off massively, because they're both incredibly powerful suites, and most charities already have them and they're free. If you're not in one of those suites, sign up for a product donation today. Yeah, and then just the third one there, Kiara, if I could, is become familiar with the concept of integrations and integration as a service. That is something that I would assign somebody in your organization to learn about, and to evaluate which of your technologies that you currently subscribe to already have integration capabilities. So those would be my top 3 things.
Very important ones. Yeah, absolutely useful. And I think that ties in well with one of your other findings from the report around the poor technology governance overall, in the sense that many organizations aren't even documenting their workflows. And you mentioned 365 and Workspace as an example of what to invest in. And for me, especially in listening you document these findings and explain them, it was stunning to notice that even among organizations with a large budget, like 2 million plus, 22% of them don't track their workflows either. So it seems that across any size organization, at least a quarter of our sector is having this issue. And so integration and automation, I guess to a degree, could be understandable, but even documenting or surveying our tech tools as a practice that we could all be improving seems like quite a significant finding. So I guess let's start from the basics. I guess we received a question, for example, on what would be the minimum technology that a small, say, 1-person nonprofit operation should be using. Would you suggest Workspace or Microsoft 365, or would there be others that you would encourage organizations to adopt?
Yeah, one of the 2 of those for sure. As a small one, like there's very little that you can't do with those technologies. That paired with an online donation payment processor, obviously, CanadaHelps is a leader in that space. With those things in place, and a commitment to learning about everything that you can do with those tools. A little bit of spreadsheet design skills. I think you could, I have created some really slick and great spreadsheet-based databases for my clients that, they didn't require any subscription costs. They just required a little bit of design and spreadsheet skills. Yeah.
So skills and time, the magic formula. You also mentioned, I noticed several gaps, right? We have a technology gap, then we perhaps have a leadership gap, and then even a culture or a skills gap. And in relation to your point that technology adoption is not strategic, right? The readiness and understanding of the urgency of digital transformation varies widely across organizations, and sometimes even between teams within the same organization. So if someone were looking for ways to get more teammates on board with digital transformation, or perhaps pitch their executives, what would you suggest as a starting, like a strong argument for getting them on board and encouraging buy-in? Like, why is now the time? Why do we have to do this?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There's actually, we have a white paper in the resources section of the Charity Growth Academy specifically on like getting buy-in from leadership and board on digital transformation investments. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. You know, I think for me, I always say to my clients, like, if I told you that you could have 8 hours back weekly that you now currently spend administering program data, volunteer data, writing reports, financial management, donor data, but if you get 8 hours back weekly, what would you do with those 8 hours? Could you spend more time in front of donors, like speaking to them? Could you just go to bed earlier? I mean, could you? It's like we're all so overworked in this sector, and I think somehow we think that like efficiency isn't a value or a priority that we should set for our organization. But what if we did, right? If we set efficiency as a priority and a value and use technology to get us there, I think that we could all work a little bit less. I mean, the amount of time wasting workaround type of processes that everybody at all levels of the organization are engaged in is not allowing us to do our best work, or quite frankly, like achieve the kind of balance that I know that we would all like between our lives and our work. And I can't think of a better argument than that.
Absolutely. Actually, we hosted a webinar just in January on an often overlooked side of the digital transformation, which is also supporting sustainability, both in terms of environmental impact of the technology tools that we use, but also is the work that we're doing sustainable from a mental health or work-life balance perspective. And we have to remember to bring those two sides together. And I think your point stresses that really, really clearly. And now we have only a few minutes left, but perhaps we can focus on this as our last question. This has been a conversation about resources, and for nonprofits especially, it wouldn't be complete without an acknowledgement of the financial resources involved in such ambitious work. And CanadaHelps has a unique perspective in this. You understand both sides of the funder and nonprofit organization relationship. And it seems also from your report that funders are hesitant to, release or support spending around specific tech needs. So first of all, would you recommend, or are you aware of any funding at any level, funding sources to cover the costs of investing in digital tools or digital management? And how much of an organization's budget would you recommend be invested towards this kind of technology and skills training?
Yeah, great questions. There is a shameful lack of specific investment in digital transformation for nonprofits. I mean, we just had a massive investment from the federal government through the Resiliency Fund. I think overall it's like $400 million over a couple of different programs, which is fantastic. It's a good start. But I think that conversations between charities and their funders, where there is a good relationship, and that conversation being open and honest, which is to say, we can't do our best work without this kind of investment. So we're not going to include these costs as admin. We're going to include these costs as program-related costs. And if you don't feel comfortable having that conversation, which I understand is tricky, and I've been a fundraiser and I had to have these kinds of conversations with funders. One thing that I also find is really helpful is, as you're requesting funding from your funders, instead of keeping like the technology costs and including them in a budget line item around administration, include them in your program delivery. So let's say one of your goals, your impact goals, is to increase program registration by 25%. As you think about that goal, think about what are the technologies that will help facilitate program registration and that increase, right? So maybe, so obviously there might be a social media campaign, but there might be, we need a database that can take in those program registrations, that can help us do application review for that program, that can help us do handle background checks, perhaps if it's there's a volunteer aspect of that program. So think about all of the processes and technologies that would be involved in achieving that impact, including any staff time and training. And that should be factored into the true costs of delivering that impact goal, right? So I think some of it about how we do budgeting, because again, it's the subscription costs don't have to be high. They don't have to be, for a small organization, more than $7,500 or $10,000 a year. But the time that it takes to sustain technology, that sort of that staff time, what I would call the true cost of technology, that has to be woven into program activities.
That's a very powerful way to think about it. Oh, go ahead, Liz, go ahead.
Just to say that we have heard from some of the charities that we've worked with on Charity Growth Academy that having their action plan has actually been a first step in getting funding. So knowing that there's challenges with funding, but there is some available, but part of being able to access that funding is knowing what you need to do. And so by doing this upfront work to really understand where your organization's at and what's going to have the most impact, it gives you a much better position to go in and request funding, because you know what you're asking for and you can better communicate the need there. So just doing that upfront work is really important. And if you're not doing it for your own external funding, it may be about developing your budgets for the future and building that in, because you know what you're working with.
Yeah, they're both really powerful distinctions that you've offered us. And you mentioned in the second half of the presentation, changing mindsets or adopting a different mindset. And I can't think of a better example than the answers you just gave us around how to strategically leverage a budget to then reach these goals, but also have impact beyond that. So unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. I wish we could continue on and on. We'd love to learn more from you. But for now, I'd like to thank you, Liz and Anya, again for sharing this knowledge with us. And I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of your day for joining this conversation. So just a reminder that we will be posting the recording of this video on our blog next week. And to keep up to date with its release date and all of our programming, I invite you to subscribe to our newsletter. It's called By the Cup, or you can follow us on X, formerly Twitter, where we also will be sharing these links with our followers. So thank you again, Anya and Liz, and thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks, Karen, everyone. Bye.